Now, as far as once you are vaccinated, I'm curious to see what kind of privileges or immunities you get from the state. That, you know what I mean, that you can travel, or just what will happen next. Well, do you think there'll be more vaccines that will follow? I wonder.
I think for the next 5 years at least, they're going to be pushing boosters every year. I guarantee it, because it already has 3 different variants, and it morphs. I mean, it was genetically produced to do that.
Right. It's trying to find places that it can succeed and multiply, and places where it can't is a dead end, and it doesn't go any further. But places where it can, it finds a host where it can adapt, where the shapes of its molecular structures are just such that it can get past. It can still reproduce. I guess what does it do? It gets a hold of a cell, and it ejects its RNA material into the cell, and it takes over the cell's reproductive machinery and causes the cell to replicate its information, and the cell reproduces more of these viral.
Yes, it's a virus. That's what viruses do.
They can't reproduce on their own. They have to take over a living cell as a host and use its genetic reproductive machinery inside the cell to create and replicate itself. And then the cell explodes, and then you have thousands of new. So
I use viruses in college. I used a few examples to prove that evolution was real.
Well, I mean, I follow you. Evolution, in the sense that adaptation and the elasticity of the mechanics is changeable, but that doesn't compel me to believe that evolution as a explanation for the species. So you have to have a precursor. You have to have an original cause that will allow us to understand the nature of the species and genetic machinery itself. I mean, I don't automatically agree that evolution. I think that what you're seeing is the flexibility in the adaptation, so that species can change color, they can adapt, but I don't know if that leads one species to become another. I don't know how the brontosaurus becomes the ape, it becomes the Cro-Magnon man, becomes the humanoid. Like, I don't see any of that. You see what I'm saying?
Well, the Bible says God made each animal after its own kind.
Right.
Which means kind is very important. That means genetic, I don't know how to word it, but the genetic junk that each species has.
Well, like Bates says, from
species animals.
Right,
it's never been found.
From the genotype to the phenotype.
Phenotype,
right?
Yeah.
So
the instructions are the wait. One's the instructions and one's the material. Well, anyway, I think the instructions are the phenotype.
Well, you're going to get the actual outcome within when you get down to the cellular level and the zygote. You're going to get a specific matching of kinds of Y and X chromosomes, and so this kind of genetic machinery that causes reproduction, it's so mind-blowing, because when you go into the different animal kingdoms, like the fungus kingdom, or reptiles, amphibians, marsupials, the mammals, all the complexity that lies therein, you can see that all these different creatures have been formed out of a single genetic sequencing process, so that it's hard to explain how moss and acorns and mushrooms and horses are all made from the same genetic machinery. So that there lies like a deeper question existentially of how that kind of modus operandi to begin with. So people want to fall back to evolution to see this nice sweeping curvature, a chain of events over time, so we can have millions and millions of years of development, and then eventually you get all these different species adapting and changing into other species, and then eventually the whale and the horse are all just part of like a tree of life, So that's what I question. I question how that could be. I do see that the bone structures in whales and in horses, when you line it up carefully, is very similar, but so is the reproductive structure when they go from being a fetus and they're born, whether they're born from an egg or they're born from their mother. You see what I'm saying? Or whether the father carries the fertilized seed in his mouth for 6 weeks, helping the mother to carry on reproduction. I mean, all these kind of programs of reproduction are so uniquely and curiously adapted all over the planet that it's hard for me to be like, just evolution just happened. I don't see that. I think that there's something far more sophisticated at work.
I think there's, whether it's God or whether it's an alien species or some intelligence is guiding reproduction. We have Neanderthal DNA, and we have, I'll never pronounce it right, I never do, Denisovans. It's another, it's mostly from Russia in that area. They found Denisovans, which are Denisovans. It's just another Neanderthal type species. And we mated with both of them because we have their DNA, and we know we have their DNA. I wonder if it goes back to what you were saying, just basic human. They're not monkeys. They can't mate with monkeys. We can never mate with monkeys, yet we can mate with other species of Homo erectus.
Right. Well, I mean, you have to admit that as we go back through the record geologically, and we find more and more of these pyramids and the abandoned civilization, as we fill in the blanks, there is a lot more to the story, and it is really mind blowing. So, that I think that on some level, the way I look at it from a biblical point of view, and scientifically, which people think, well, I mean, how can that not be, diametrically opposed? But the idea is that if you look carefully at Genesis and you look at the first and second chapter of Genesis, it's very painstakingly clear if you carefully read it, that and this is just general. This is just the exegesis of what precisely it says. And people can question it, but it all goes back to the instrumentality of the existential nature of man. Like, where do we come from? So, in the third day, and this is before there's anything living on Earth. Okay, this is the third day of creation, so you're probably going to have to go back several billion years. And before, and it looks like at this time water is made, and it looks like you might have some stars being born, and so on and so forth. And then the surface of the earth at that time, according to Genesis, is just void and rocky. And the first thing that God does is He takes from the clay of the ground, and He makes man. And He makes man in His image. And He takes man to give him the dominion of all that He's going to create. And also, if you read it literally, it says that He gives it to man here, Adam, to basically name everything that His God makes. So then you go through the days of creation, which the next thing is going to be green life on Earth. And then you're going to get to the explosion in the sea of teeming, of all the teeming things that God would make of teeming life, which we would think maybe the Cambrian explosion at that point. I'm not really sure how many hundreds of millions of years you go back. But then you go, you can see that all that stuff is in the fossil record, and it's all died off. And we're kind of narrowed down to like 1/100th of the species that used to exist now exist on Earth. Maybe less, So the point is that at this point in time, before all that happened, Adam was made, and he lived in a special place that God designed eastward in Eden. Eastward in a place called Eden, there was a garden. So you got to really differentiate between the garden and the wilderness, because on the earth is the wilderness, which is void, which is all these things are kind of happening and playing out. But in the garden God made for Adam was a special place where he would have everything he would need. And it was from this place that Adam would be able to have dominion and to be in working with the Lord in the creation of this world. You see what I'm saying? That's what it says. So to just kind of sum it up, we get to the very end of creation where everything is there, and God's going to wrap it up, and He says there is no person, there's no mate, there's no other a partner for Adam. So Adam goes to sleep, and when he wakes up, there's Eve. Okay?
Yeah.
So at this point, they're immortal. They don't die. They don't even know what death is. They're virtually naked. They're covered in the Shekinah light of God. They're covered in God's perfect nature. They're made perfectly as they should have been. And then the very next thing that happens is extraordinary. And this is the part where the Luciferian, incursion begins. This is where, right?
Yeah, this is where they flip flop on you, because the serpent gave them knowledge. He was the bringer of light. He was bringer of knowledge.
That's the Luciferian doctrine, right?
And then God is the bad guy because he made you with no knowledge. Like, well, same with Prometheus and Epimetheus,
that's the argument, right? And I totally get that. But if you look at it carefully, the reading of it, which is instrumental, which is essential, you have to recognize that in the center of the garden there was two trees. Two particular trees.
The tree of knowledge of good and evil.
So it's not to say that God didn't give them knowledge of good and evil, or knowledge, because they had a lot of knowledge from what it looks like. But as far as relating to, he said, do not eat this one. In fact, if you look at it, I think it says, the God said, do not touch it.
He says, don't even look at it. Stay away from it, right?
So as soon as Eve arrives, as soon as she arrives, now Adam had been, according to this paradigm of the construct of this narrative that we're talking about, Adam had already been existing from the third day on. He had been around the tree. He knew all about the tree. He'd seen the tree. He looked at it. He knew, don't eat the tree of life. Next to it, eat that one. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, don't eat it. But Eve finds herself first day of being created.
Yeah.
Wake up, open your eyes, boom, you're Eve, and there you are. And what the very first thing that happens? She's deceived into eating it, because the result of it, despite the knowledge of good and evil, or black versus white, or red versus blue, or Democrats versus Republicans, or A versus B, or antithesis versus thesis, despite the polarization and the breakdown between which is which, black and white, A and B, right and wrong, right? She finds herself in that situation immediately, so she eats it. What happens? Instantly she realizes she's naked because her light goes out. It's like I tell my wife, it's like a light bulb that when you unscrew it and it just blinks out. And you can see it's glass, you can look inside of it and see it's got a filament, and you can see, but it doesn't really have any particular purpose. It's just delicate, it's frail, it can easily break, it doesn't do anything. But when you turn it and plug it in, all of a sudden it lights up and it does what it does. So that's what happened to her. It's as if you were to look at your wife and suddenly all you saw were her bones. I mean, she was naked, she was in her mortal coil, she had fallen as soon as she ate that. So what happens? She turns and she hands it to Adam. He doesn't have to eat it, but he eats it because he chooses to do it because of love. Because he followed her. He followed her because of love. He followed her because it was consequential.
God gives us choice. I mean, if we didn't have choice, we'd be robots. But he gives us the choice to listen to him, look at all these good things I did for you, or look at all this I created for you, or do it your own way. And they choose to do it their own way.
No, I think that they try to find a way to... the word Bab-El If you look at the old interpretation, it means Bab El, gate of God, and so that's what they were trying to construct at the Tower of Babel, was that gate back to. If you read, it says it back to where they came from. Basically, they were trying to get back to for where they had fallen from. So the place where Adam and Eve were when they fell and they were ejected out of that place where the tree of life was, and out of that garden, they were pushed out onto the earth, into the wilderness. And then now they're they're mammals. They're in their physical form. They've lost the covering and the place to inhabit, the actual dwelling place, and now they're down in the earth. And this is where you're going to see the advent of the Cro-Magnon man, the introduction of the human species into the evolution of the planet, if you will. Is the system of the planet has been rolling on for hundreds of millions of years, and they were above it. They were immortal. They existed in a plane above it, and they were involved with the earth. But wherever that place was, that special garden in Eden, they no longer could be there anymore. So that's where the whole thing begins with Nimrod, when he is basically trying to go back eastward towards Eden. He's trying to go back again to the place where they had been kicked out of. And so that was the rebellion of Nimrod. That was the point of the Tower of Babel. And the creation of that religion was a way to take the instrumentality and the purposes of God and to just make it their own. I think the constellations were changed at that time, the meaning, and that occult nature has always been there. Even the planets, Saturn and Neptune and Venus and Mars are all named after these Olympian gods. The Greeks got from, if you read Pythagoras, he was educated in Egypt and Babylon, and he came back with his Pythagorean brotherhood, and ultimately he was bringing back again that system of pagan sun worship.
Well, I think we're moving back to Babylon, and the reason is, here's an example: the languages were confounded.
Right.
But now
that's the thing. You jumped right on it, because you're right. Dang. So that was my whole thing right there. Is that the thing that evolutionary scientists and biologists and anyone in academia can fail to understand is the nature of if we all came from this pre-Homo sapien status where we were like hominoids, and we just we're just hairless monkeys, and we would never have come up with 17 or 15 different completely separate languages, completely separated, completely fragmented and broken into different shards, if you will. So there's no way that's where God really intervened in history and showed they'll have to ultimately rectify that understanding, because that's right after the time when Adam and Eve are going to fall, and the whole advent of human history begins, and he's instantly whatever happened there at Babel. I think they did speak one language, and then they didn't. So whatever happened, whatever broke in the human psyche, or
because they were united in one accord against God, and so he broke that accord, their language.
And then he said that by doing that, he would separate them into different nations. And you can't get around it. We can't get around the Chinese, or there's very many different cultures and languages that have really become. It's mind blowing if you look at the nature of language, because it does shift and change too, over time. So it's adapting too.
Well, by extension, go to the Acts of the Apostles, when the Holy Spirit is visited upon them. They go out and preach, and they think they're using their same language, Aramaic, I guess is what it was. But people all over were hearing them in their own language.
Right.
It was as if God intervenes and he brings communication and
clarity
and back into accordance. So they got a little piece of what it was like, a little piece of knowledge of what it was like in the early days.
No, I think you're right. Yeah. So by the inspiration of the Holy Spirit and by that power, they were able to just without effort bridge the divide between those broken languages and that broken division that's there that separates us. So no, that's interesting. I mean, those are the kind of ideas that are just beyond. I mean, in this age, it's kind of like an academic fascism that you're seeing. The control of just higher criticism over academia. The mindset, the propaganda system of it is it's profound. So I mean, Darwin has been completely, in my mind. The Darwinian model, the Darwinian system is completely broken down on every level. You can't show genetic mechanisms that could lead to evolution because there's these huge parameters, these huge walls of sheer rock that separate systems from just evolving into another system, or from something that has a tail to just become something that has wings. Those kind of things. The idea of a creature that swims or a creature that flies, they're etched so deeply into the actual design and machinery of the organism, and that's why I think it's so interesting. Mankind is on the brink of creating AI, artificial intelligence. But I thought to myself, well, God already did that, and here we are. That's all. Well, that's what we are, bro. We are just really, really highly advanced technology, AI that God created. Or you can say, well, the alien species did it. Well, then those alien species are the AI that God created, because some original intelligence was able to create these mechanisms, and I think that people, they struggle with it because you can institute egoism into your own philosophy, into your own intellectual presuppositions, just your own self-interest. Like, well, I think that having a God just doesn't work for me. So then you just kind of like delete God file, and so that you can just kind of go around with the blinders on and pretend like that's not something that you need to deal with. But in reality, all the evidence, if you're intellectually honest, is pointing to the fact that this is, I mean, people want to say like a simulacra or a simulation. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the down to the very on a chromosomal level, the X and Y chromosome, when you get down to that kind of level of engineering, and then that kind of system can build itself up a million times with cellular division. Go back and tell me how cells divide again. Tell me, what was it? Explain it to me again, because no one can even get to that level and even understand it. Because even Darwin just had no idea what was beyond the big old blob of the cell that they could see with their archaic microscopes. They couldn't get a good look at it. Now with these new microscopes, everyone can see that there's no way to explain this shit with evolution and Darwin. Okay, it doesn't work, and no one wants to admit it. We just want to carry on with this old, like the decaying old framework in your mind, and it doesn't work. It does not explain it.
He asserted that if gradualism was not part of the evolution, if each species didn't would advance gradually into new ones due to mutations, that the whole system falls down. Then they discovered the Cambrian explosion, where you had all these years of nothing, and then all of a sudden, everything. So then the neo-Darwinists came back and called that punctuated equilibrium.
Right.
That
every once in a while
jumps way forward, and then it goes back down to just gradualism.
No, the Cambrian explosion is amazing, and it's amazing in the fossil record. And to me, it just goes to the timeless, ageless, infinite mind of God. That everything is just already, all the evidence is really there, and there's no getting around it. That a species can't just suddenly. It's more likely that an alien civilization created all those weird, freaky-looking Cambrian, life forms, and just hit us with like a comet and just spread them all over the face of the earth to seed life years. It's more likely that happened. Yeah, but then even that doesn't even you can't even get a chain of evolution from those creatures, them trying to survive, them mating and reproducing, and then successfully carrying on offspring, and every generation after generation. The machinery works so well that they just sprout new arms and legs and new features and wings, and they get to be huge, and that's just, I mean, there's no way to get that cellular progression to happen. But with like Flintstones and with all this kind of archaic propaganda in our minds, we just think that that's what happened, and we just write it off. And we're still in a dark ages intellectually, in my mind, because when Jesus in the Bible held up that mustard seed, you know what I mean? It should have been like, dun, dun, because you can't even get a mustard seed unless somebody invented that like highly functional tiny seed technology, so that when it goes in the ground, you give it some water and it produces 1,000 more. How do you have 1,000 more of those same exact seeds inside that seed? And then again, and then again, and then again, and then again. You see what I'm saying? It's the nature of seed reproduction itself that no one can explain. That's totally, in my mind, the evidence of the Creator. I like to see people try their hardest to argue with me, and then I look at their face or their mouth, and I can see that they are themselves the evidence of God, because that's the one thing that people can't rectify. They can't really put us into the biological, chain of events, the biological species here, all the different, even the monkey. We're really not like monkeys. Sorry.
No.
We're not. I'm just saying. So once you put us up against the human species, up against everything else that's here or ever was here, they showed this huge, like woolly mammoth rhino. It's like a rhinoceros from the woolly mammoth period. That it's a rhinoceros woolly, right? Instead of a woolly mammoth.
Is it?
Yeah, you should see it. They found one totally, and they dethawed him. You know this.
Oh, they found that frozen.
Yep.
Yeah, I did hear that they found a woolly mammoth. I thought it was the best way it was, not a rhinoceros.
They did, but now they found also a woolly, from that period, a woolly rhino too. So I'm like, whoa, like that's pretty crazy. Like if you find that thing like in a cave frozen or something, like how does that work? How did it get in the cave? Anyway, I think species change. I think they change over time, and they can change size and shape and all kinds of things, but they don't become something else. That's my whole point. So, I mean, we'll have to just see how that breaks down.
Right.
It's a biological, now it's an issue of microbiology.
The closest Darwin got was with, and I don't remember what type of birds it was, but these birds, the same species of birds, but some had long beaks and some had short beaks. And the long beak ones insert their beaks into certain flowers that grew in a certain area at a certain time. And they insert their beaks into it, and the ones that couldn't reach the good stuff in the flower died off. But due to mutations, the longest beak ones could reach the food within the flower, the nectar, and that's all they ate. And what they did is they reproduced, and that produced longer beaks. And then over time, they keep reproducing. And the most successful ones are the ones with the longest beaks, and ultimately they're the ones that survive. And they're far enough. This is what the Darwinian view, and they're far enough away from the original species that they can be their own species. Now I can kind of see that a little bit, but they're basically the same kind. You know, you have a bird, and let's say you have the bird from the Garden of Eden. You have all these possibilities genetically within that bird to express themselves throughout the generations.
Well, here I'll make it easier for you too. I mean, even look at dogs. I mean, dogs are originally wolves or canines, and now they've been kind of, because of their ability to interbreed, they've been played with so much by humans that they're just all different shapes and sizes. They're ultimately still a dog, but they can take on any kind of shape and size and color, and it's kind of bizarre. You know, with the canine species, if you will, is a remarkable one, and it shows. In my mind, it shows the elasticity and the adaptability of the genetic machinery. And that's what I want to look at. I want to look at the genetic machinery itself and see how we get gorillas, and maybe our relationship with gorillas will be such that eventually we'll have like household pet gorillas that only come up to your knee, that they're like, how you have like little household cats. I mean, like, what I'm saying, like, so not to say that's such a thing that you'd want to do, but I'm just saying that's the reality of our life on planet Earth is something that has to be looked at, because we're not part of the evolutionary sequence of events here. Even if you want to just give it all to evolution, we didn't evolve out of this system. There's nothing about us that connects us to here. You see what I'm saying? Even a horse, when it's born, can stand up within 3 hours and begin to walk. I mean, humans, it takes 9 months. I'm just saying. I just say if you look at everything else, you have to really. If my dog likes to just go and lick turds outside on the ground and has all kinds of different kind of antibodies or whatever it has in its saliva, so that it doesn't need to go to the hospital every time. You know what I'm saying? We're different. If you look at us in connection with everything else here, you can see the stark differences. This is very obvious. That humans were something that God specially made, and we were just created like Spanish moss, like crickets, like everything else that was created out of DNA. We were too, and we belong to that designer. In my mind, we're owed that recognition to the designer, to the creator. And people want to look at it however they want to look at it. They want to take their brief life that they have and run off and just imagine that humans can just believe anything they choose to believe. That's how it looks to me.
Walter White does a great little mini series on evolution. I think it's 3 videos. And he was a professor in South Africa, and he taught evolutionary biology and some other things. But he really lays out how evolution works. He really lays out how the genotype and phenotype. You can't. Basically, it boils down to is you can't have the material without the instructions.
Right.
But you can't have the instructions. Where do the instructions come from? Because they don't come out of that material which they make. They come out of something else.
It's way too sophisticated.
It's I suggest that you watch it, man.
No, I did. I did. I mean, totally. Yeah, man. Totally dig that. I mean, it's just raw science. It's what everyone used to know before science was politicized into the scientism. Yeah. Now it's scientism, and So I think that they're off on a way, and they've taken this like ideology, and they've gone off into this direction now where they're what do you call it? As far as they're wanting to become cyborgs and transhumanism, I think they just all their trajectory or all their calculations are all wrong. And so the way that's all going to go, we'll put implantation sensors in our brains and we'll connect to the internet. Just the whole scope of the thinking of that is just so off basis and off course that they're just.
It's blasphemous. It's playing.
And it's insane. God. And it's insane. And it'll just become a disaster. It's obviously they're just going to like make a huge disaster out of what could have been. It could have been like an age of paradise and beauty and wonder with technology. Technology could have created an age of wonder on Earth. But no, they're too retarded and they're too ignorant and selfish and egotistical for that. They're gonna create a horrible, tyrannical, like rusty, degradation of human life. You know what I mean? So it's so bizarre, like just that they're thinking like that. If you look at it,
it's their desire to get back to the Garden of Eden.
Right. It's their desire to not die, because that's what humans really can't rectify. There's a couple of things that make it real obvious. Is like, you ever go to work just with no clothes on? You know why you don't? Because you're naked, and you're naked. Like, that's the first thing that the Lord pointed out. Is like, you're naked, right? So that was the first thing that happened. Something changed in the state of their metaphysical reality. That all of a sudden now they were just like, they were just standing there. Before their state was they didn't need it. They didn't need any clothes, but now all of a sudden they did. So that's my whole point. Is the Shekinah glory of God left them, Ichabod, like it's abandoned, and they fell, and that's what we've been dealing with, and they just can't rectify the fact that they're going to die. So that's what Adam and Eve had to deal with was death. So I mean that's the whole point. The wages of sin is death. Like the whole point of it is, do you believe God? That's what happened when Jesus went down and to the river. They heard a voice and said, "This is my son, in whom I am well pleased. You should listen to him." And everyone heard it, and so it goes to like the testimony of God. Like, do you actually believe God's own testimony? When he's like, "Do not eat from this tree," he didn't say that. Look, this tree is never going to be eaten from ever. He just said, "Do not." Like maybe in the future day, maybe things were arranged that they would eat it. Maybe it wasn't ready yet. And it's also the chain of events of entropy. Like the first thing that happens when you reach up and you pull a fruit off a tree and then you bite it, and then when you're done with it, what happens to it? It hits the ground.
it hits the ground.
And then what does it do? It's a process of seed, time, decay, life, death, life, progression. So the seed hits the ground, the fruit rots, the critters eat it, and the seed puts its root down, and it creates a new tree. And that's what happens. So there's a lot more to it. I think that the Luciferians they're off base. They want to worship the defiler. They want to worship the liar. They want to try to find a way. Prometheus brought light to man. What Lucifer did was kill Eve, and then Adam basically committed suicide. That's what it looks like to me. I'm just saying.
You're right. Have you ever? This is a great book. It's not a large book. It's called The Lost Books of Eden. And it's these stories, they're not part of the Talmud, it's part of the Jewish traditions. It's called The Lost Books of Eden. And they go into all these scenarios that happen after the fall. I will check that out. And they go into it, and they kill themselves several times, and God puts them back, and it's a really great book. It really opens up a lot of what you're talking about.
I think that Adam realized that she had been deceived. It wasn't a thing like, well, you didn't know, so we can just flip the switch back. It's causality. So once it happened and Adam walks in, he's like, so he eats it, and then what they do, this is what it says. I'm not trying to but people don't know what it says. It says that they went and hid. And so...
Yeah.
Adam, my wife just piped up and said, Adam went and hid. So what happens next is the Lord asks Adam, what happened? I mean, we'll have to go back and actually read the wording, but he said,
he said, I was hiding because I was naked. And then God says, how do you know you were naked? Did you eat of the tree?
Right.
He said, yeah, that's when they passed the box.
Yeah, that's
the woman you gave me the fruit and I did eat. And then he asked her, it's like, the serpent you put in the garden beguiled me and I did eat.
Right.
And they didn't suddenly die. It's not like they just dropped dead. No. It was over a period of time.
It was because they died because first of all they lost their Shekinah light, that light that originally was in them, the light that Jesus had when he was on top of the mountain when he was transfixed. That light, that was how they were originally made. And when that light went out, they had to leave the garden because they obviously could not follow instructions, and they were not to eat of the tree of life anymore too. Which if you go back to the very end of the book in Revelation, it talks about the very last chapter talks about the tree of life, and the leaves of the tree of life are for the healing of the nation. So I'm just putting that into context of what the Bible means to people who are very religious, and maybe they go to Lent and they get the ash on the forehead, or they go to whatever they do, that they might not know what the actual documents say, and this is what they unequivocally say. So the point is that I think that we're having to deal with this process of Adam blamed the wife then blamed Lucifer, and the whole process of that sin, and we're gonna suss it out through all these permutations and iterations of life and generations of men. Like, it always stuns me when I happen to pass a large graveyard, like how many generations of us have come and gone, billions and billions of people who have come and gone before us in this experience, and we're in the crucible, we're in the experience of this place, and people want to talk about reincarnation, and Tibetan Buddhists have a really beautiful way of articulating the mystery itself, and putting some kind of metrics to it, so everyone can understand that. And so I think that we've been here a very short time in the scheme of things on Earth, and I think that this is going to wrap up very quickly too. I think the transhumanist elitists with their yachts, I think they think that this is going to carry on for thousands of years, and thousands and thousands of years will go by, and that's, they like to look into the Star Wars future, and so I see that it's in their minds, but I don't think it's meant to be. I think that if you read carefully, this system is not a safe place. It's not a stable place as people might imagine it to be. So. No. The Earth and the cosmos too. Yeah.
I was thinking of this video I saw a long time ago, and they take these children about 5 years old enough to understand, and they set a box down in front of them that looks very appealing. The box does, and they say, "Do not open the box. I'll be right back." And they videotape the kids, and invariably every kid opens the box.
Right.
And that's kind of that's our curious nature that Lucifer took advantage of.
Oh, I think so.
He knew what we would do.
Right.
And God didn't put a gate around the tree.
Right.
A fence around the tree. God could have done anything with the tree, but it was a test. It was a test as to whether or not God was good, or was there better out there.
Or is God a liar? Did God lie about the tree?
Did God lie? Yeah.
Right.
Satan said he lied.
Yeah, he said, did God say that? Because surely your eyes will be opened and you'll be like God. That's what Lucifer's lie was.
Basically, God would be jealous that you would be like them.
Right. He was keeping you from it. He was keeping you from the good stuff. You were kept down without being able to know what was, the real knowledge. Your eyes are so closed to the real knowledge. So, I think that's the kind of figurative and symbolic, esoteric nature of all the different systems that came out of Nimrod and out of Babylon. I mean, I think that there was one part of the human race who understood that they had fallen, and that it was a process of repentance, and that relationship with God was a repenting thing. And then with Nimrod, I think that it was a rebellion against God. So that was what Egypt represented, and it was almost an acceptance of the new prison, the worship of the sun and all that. I mean, it's kind of a strange. I think that
way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I think they just adapted to the new place, and they created a dictator. And so that's what Pharaoh was. And that's what in Egypt, and that's what Nebuchadnezzar was in Babylon. They were just all-powerful god kings, So they were the head of their worship and the head of their politics. So those are the kind of figures that we have to look out for today. Those who are the pinnacle of religion and the pinnacle of political power, and they're god kings. Those are the kind of individuals we have to be wary of.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think that. What's going to happen is that God calls everyone out of the world system, and not everyone comes out of it.
Right.
And I think that ultimately, the way it's going to go down is that people are going to realize that God's way is better. God's way is the best way.
Right.
And all of this history that we have is evidence in court that Lucifer's way was wrong.
Right.
When he's trying to present his way as right, that he's
the new God.
Yeah.
So, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think that if you look at it carefully, for whatever reason, there was a war in the heavens. And that's really where the real controversy takes place. I think that humans kind of forget that, but we're part of that, but we're off to the side on Earth. But there was a war in the heavens between a third of the angels took Lucifer's side and fell, and the other two-thirds didn't. And so I think that what you're seeing is that that controversy playing out in the court of heaven over time. So this is a long-term court case where the defendant is going to get his time to prove whether he's right or not. Is God a terror? Is God a monster? Is God some kind of tyrannical overlord that we should all be afraid of? So that's the argument that the defendant is making. So we have to even tread carefully even when we get into the subject, because if you read the Bible, it says that we're not even to talk about such personalities and such matters. But for the purpose of erudition and learning, we have to point out that people who are siding with Lucifer on earth are siding against God, and there's no in between. So you have to recognize that that God is the absolute creator, and that his choice about what he does it goes beyond question, right? So I think that in the end, he's going, why it says salvation, right? I think he's going to save man and the woman, Adam and Eve. He's going to save the people, and he's going to punish the evildoer who was really the murderer. That's what he said. And he said, I saw Lucifer fall, and he was a murderer from the beginning, And so I think that he's the father of murder and the father of lies, and so that once we reject that, then we can go on and we can actually go to the next level of our spiritual evolution, and I think we will. I think that, and people can question it. I mean, can God bring all the past humans who died all throughout history back from the grave? Can he do that? I mean, that's a good question.
And if you do die, do you need to be
Darth Vader?
What if you're burned up into little pieces? You're burned up into nothing but vapor. God takes back the instructions, what makes you, back to him, and then he reloads it later on, just like a computer.
Absolutely. And if you want to look at it in the hologram of time, if you want to understand the hologram of time, as time expands and the clock ticks, and as the universe expands and as time goes by, there's a time before you existed, and there'll perhaps be a time after you exist, and you'll be in the ground. But if you rewind the clock back and you turn the spiral around and you spin the wheels, you go back to a point when you were born, and you can look at history again, and you can see that it's all right there. We're actually streaming in time, and we're putting out like a continuous signal of existential information throughout our lives, and in that time and space, and that coordinate, and that moment of history, you're there. You know what I mean? You are there, and God. So your information is there, and everything you're saying, and all the echo of your voice off the walls, like everything that your heartbeat is happening. You know what I'm saying? So it can't be lost just because time went by. That's not an impediment to God. And I was thinking about death. Even Darth Vader and the Empire and the Emperor. They couldn't find a way to overcome death either. It was a problem that they were having. They tried to fix it with new cyborg arms, and they tried to figure out a way to be eternal. But in the end, analysis, no one could do it. So that's the problem that people have, is that the only way the only way death is ever going to be overcome and destroyed is by the hand of God. And so
you picked a great example of Star Wars, because that's the Luciferian example, because Darth Vader technically is God in the paradigm.
Right.
Luke Skywalker is Lucifer Skywalker.
Right.
The stars, the angels are stars, and it's a great. There's a great story, but God isn't the dictator that like Darth Vader, but they're portraying Darth Vader as a God type. Got me thinking too much.
Well, I'm sorry, but I want to point out, like with Theosophy, when you go back to like Blavatsky, they said the same thing, which is that there was the great original unnameable backdrop of the cosmos, the great what they call it. Anyway, but then there was a new light, a Sophia, a new light of truth that came out to guide mankind, and this is the Lucifer. So yeah, it's the same concept but yeah. No, I mean, I'll let you go. I don't want to keep you. I know you're a busy man, but thank you for
talk about. Yeah, man. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was saying we can talk about this some more and kind of do a comparison of how Sophia is like Lucifer, because she creates and she's not supposed to create.
Right.
Not on her own. She goes out on her own and creates.
I got you.
We need to talk about that some more.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'll talk to you soon, man. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Be blessed, bro. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.